Joining us now for the first time, someone who is willing to come on Newsmax and start that conversation, the former host of Meet the Press and host of the Todd cast. Chuck Todd, we appreciate you being here. Thank you.
No problem, Rob. Look, I will say this. I don't say this as a clarification, but it's sort of a frustration of mine, which is I think both left and right sometimes look at somebody who's not on their side and assume they must be on the other side. Some of us are swimming in this middle of this stream. I accept the premise that if you're not on one side or the other, people get skeptical. But I'd like to think, believe it or not, some of us are stuck here.
You understand why this audience might consider you a left-wing news host,
totally,
right?
By the way, and I accept that many people, all of this stuff is subjective.
Okay.
Right? I always say this about whether they're listening to you or me or anybody. You know, ultimately, all you have is your own personal credibility. You stick with your facts. And at the end of the day, I think our job is to help. You know, I'm not here to tell you to drink the water. My job's to lead you to the stream.
What do you think was the biggest mistake, Chuck, of the dominant media during the 4 years that Joe Biden was president?
Oh, I'd go back over this. I think the biggest mistake legacy media made was deplatforming Donald Trump. I think the reaction post-January 6th of suddenly saying anybody who was on the other side of that issue wouldn't certify the election and deplatforming him off of Twitter and Facebook, now X, of course, it made everything worse. Because what happened, right? We have now completely different ecosystems. And that is less healthy for the system than anything else. If I'm willing to sit down with Vladimir Putin or the president of Iran, you're telling me you can't interview somebody who voted not to certify on January 6th? I found that I was one of those people who didn't want to sign on to that sort of, and it was like it was like this unofficial sort of pressure campaign that many did. And I think that if you were to ask me what's the core mistake, right, and everything else was derivative from there, but I view that as a core mistake of sort of the intelligentsia of the left, if you will.
Do you want to add anything to that? Just let's talk about the 4 years when Joe Biden was actually president. Maybe mistakes or something that you wish the dominant media did differently. And when I say dominant media, we can call it legacy media, corporate media, whatever.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that it was not. I don't know how you measure this.
You know where I'm going with this, right?
No, I do. Look, I don't know how you. Look, I don't know how you measure this because it's always been, you know, there were some of us who thought, why aren't more people questioning? Look, our polling, for instance, at NBC News, we were constantly polling the age question. It was clearly a huge issue with the public. And there was always this disconnect about it and about dealing with the question. And there was way too many accepting of the premises, which I think we both know, had it been somebody else who was showing problems, you know, whatever you want to call it, whether they're slower, you know, none of us know exactly what the issue may have been. But the fact of the matter is the political answer to his problems was to travel the country to sell your program. How come he wasn't traveling the country to sell the program? Now, by the way, Rob, I have the same questions now about Donald Trump. How come he's not traveling the country selling his programs anymore?
He's traveling the world selling his programs, right?
A little bit traveling the world, but he's not talking to the American public the way he did as much in his first term. And I think politically, that's a problem for him. I think that's why his numbers are flat.
So that's a tough one for me, just because anytime somebody compares Donald Trump's schedule to Joe Biden's schedule, I think we run into problems. And with Joe Biden, I know the polling, but I don't think the polling indicated chronological age. You know, Joe Biden in his late 70s at the beginning of his presidency and then into his early 80s. I think it was what was happening between Joe Biden's ears. Chuck, I don't think we have the answer to that question today. We might not have that question till he's dead and gone, if ever. But I think there was something going on with Joe Biden cognitively. And part of the divide that I saw on places like NBC and places like Newsmax, look, I was the host of the morning show here in 2020. And I remember just saying, well, wait a second. Now, I had two grandfathers that had Alzheimer's. And I'm armchair diagnosing, but I have eyes and I can do that. And I have a brain. And I could tell there was something off with this man. And then as 4 years went on, we sort of continued to see this. And we saw people on the left, like Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, call them cheap fakes or deep fakes. And I just thought that divide, that chasm, I think is part of the reason why Donald Trump won last November.
It could be. I also think ultimately it was, the voters that decided this election, I think were simply, they liked the economy of Trump 1.0 better than they liked the economy of Biden-Harris.
Let me ask you about that. You tweeted about that.
I do, at the end of the day, think that, you ask me what's the difference between him carrying the 7 swing states. I think that was the difference.
Let me ask you about the economy. So you tweeted this week that Republicans got elected for one reason, to bring down costs. The Trump administration has abandoned that platform to enrich itself. Can you explain that to us? And I'll just, a couple numbers. You don't need these, but the audience. The Dow set a record this week. Inflation's at 2.9%. The S&P and NASDAQ have both set records recently. The national average for a gallon of gas is below $3 for the first time in 4 years. Egg prices are down. Mortgage rates are at a 3-year low. He's been president for 9 months. That's a lot.
The point is actually inflation's at 3%, so it's actually creeped back up. You want to say there's not a huge difference between 2.9 and 3.
Well, but Chuck, it's at 9% in June of 2022,
hang
right?
on. The tariffs have added to the cost of a lot of imported goods. Simple one is coffee. You've got the whether we could discuss whether this is good policy or bad policy, but the deportations have impacted meatpacking workers, which has impacted the cost of chicken, impacted the cost of beef, impacted the cost of pork, and we know that those prices have been going up. The point I'm saying on this is, I think he's bringing on himself. This is not about, I'm not trying to make a campaign against this. What I'm pointing out is you've got that issue. I think we have 2 economies right now. If you have some money, you're doing well because the stock market's doing well. But if you don't have any money in the stock market, you're not feeling the upside of this Trump economy. And the paycheck to paycheck world, you're living in a different world. And I think that's where he's got potential trouble.
2 quick ones, maybe 3. I want to ask you about this new White House ballroom. The left-leaning media is not happy about this. You tweeted, between the destruction of the East Wing and the pardoning of a corrupt family business partner, Trump is in the I can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue phase of his presidency. Chuck, presidents have been adding to the White House for centuries. Why is Donald Trump being treated differently?
I don't think he's being treated differently. I don't think anybody did it the way he's going about doing it. I think that's the difference. I mean, look, I ran into somebody this morning.
Do you mean that he's financing it privately in that way?
Well, no,
that's
it's
a good
not
thing.
that. The
if
fact
Joe
that he's
Biden did this same thing and financed it privately, he'd be celebrated, wouldn't he?
I totally disagree. If he didn't go through the White House Historical Association, if he didn't seem to do the things that everybody else in Washington, D.C. has to do, it is more of the, at first he said the East Wing wasn't going to be touched. So I think it's more of how they've messaged this.
Quick one for you. And I just want to ask you this because you were host of Meet the Press, iconic program on NBC News. Do you miss that? Do you miss the juice of that?
Occasionally I'll miss a Sunday, but I'll be honest, I'm really enjoying the longer interview because I'll say this. I think when you go longer, you don't have to, especially in the sort of the personalized media format that is podcasts or YouTube. I think the audience, it's an intimate relationship, and so it's less antagonistic. I enjoy these longer interviews.
Chuck Todd, appreciate you being with us tonight. Thanks so much for making the time.
Friend.
We'll do it again.
You got it, Rob.